Pase, por favor, pase, por favor. Paren los tres. Tranquilo, aquí, señor. Fuera. Tranquilo. Listo. Pon aquí tu mano, señor. ¿Traes armas? No, ya. Dile a tu gente que ya pare todo. Tranquilo.
Since Ovidio Guzman's arrest in January 2023, the Sinaloa Cartel seems to be losing power. But when a big cartel boss loses power, it only leads to more wars. The smaller factions within the cartel fight each other for power, and rival cartels become even more violent, trying to seize the territory from the losing side. This endless war leads to some stomach-turning incidents. People are tortured, killed, and filmed. A message from a cartel to another, and to anyone who might think of crossing them. Recently, one of the worst torture videos emerged online, and is a direct consequence of the Sinaloa Cartel turf wars. Trigger warning. This video contains very graphic details of torture and murder. Watch at your own risk. Let's explore this horrific video and the context around it. To get to the bottom of this story, we have to delve into the most recent news about the Sinaloa Cartel. And that begins with El Chapo's sons, Los Chapitos.
Judy, they are known as Los Chapitos, the four most trusted sons of the world's most notorious drug kingpin. As the I-Team has reported for several years, federal drug investigators here in Chicago consider El Chapo's sons in charge of the Sinaloa Cartel that remains this area's largest trafficker of cocaine and methamphetamines.
Ovidio, Ivan, and Jesus expanded El Chapo's business by building new, more proficient labs and extending the trafficking routes from the United States to the whole world. So even though El Chapo was arrested in 2016 and extradited to the US, the Sinaloa Cartel is stronger than ever. El Chapo had groomed his 5 eldest sons to take over his business in case of his demise. And in the world of cartels, every drug lord knows they will meet their demise sooner or later, be it through arrest or death. One of his 5 sons, Edgar, was gunned down in a parking lot in 2008. The other 4 Chapitos, well, they did exactly as they were told. They became brutal monsters, desensitized to violence and power-hungry, like their father. These are just some of the charges against Ovidio Guzman.
They now say this drug lord, nicknamed the Mouse, has ordered the murders of informants, a rival drug trafficker, and a popular Mexican singer who refused to perform at his wedding.
And this was revealed during his 2023 trial. After Ovidio was arrested in January 2023, some information about him and his brothers came to light in court. Once information was obtained by these captives, typically through these individuals were killed, either by or at the direction of the Chapitos themselves, and the bodies disposed of throughout the area. While many of these victims were shot, others were fed dead or alive to tigers. For approximately 2 hours, members of the Chapitos victim 5 by inserting a corkscrew into victim 5's muscles and out of his muscles and placing hot chilies in his open wounds and nose before being shot by Ivan Archivado Guzman Salazar, the indictment alleges. The victim and his fellow slain officer were then dumped near a motel off the highway near the ranch. If anything, they sound even worse than El Chapo. So as you can imagine, the Mexican government and the DEA had been wanting Los Chapitos behind bars for a long time. In 2012, Ovidio and his older brother, Ivan, were put on a do not deal list by the United States Treasury Department. Their American assets were frozen and the brothers were forbidden from making deals with American citizens. 4 years later, their names came up again as the official leaders of the Sinaloa Cartel following their father's arrest. Side note, they are the Sinaloa leaders around the Culiacan area. There's also Ismael Zambada, or El Mayo's faction, and El Mayo has been dodging the law for 5 decades now. Los Chapitos had been in the spotlight in the last few years more than El Mayo has been throughout his whole criminal career. During the last few years, they bought huge quantities of ephedrine from Argentina. This is an ingredient used in making meth. Similarly to El Mencho CJ&G, Los Chapitos seized the opportunity and shifted their business around the market's demands.
They literally started moving from avocados to chemical precursors to make drugs like. It's like, okay, so what the U.S. market like? They like their avocados from Mexico and they're from Mexico.
The Sinaloa Cartel thus made the meth and fentanyl epidemics much, much worse. Of course, the DEA wasn't going to let this slide. They charged Ovidio with conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, white powder, and weed into the U.S. Ovidio and Ivan were just preparing for a massive shipment, 5 kilograms of a ton of and 500 grams of meth. In October 2019, 3 months after El Chapo received his life sentence, the DEA led a huge operation against Ovidio and Ivan Guzman in collaboration with the Mexican military. The plan was to arrest Ovidio and Ivan and extradite them to the US, where they would face the same sentence as their father. On October 17, 2017, the Mexican military localized the Ovidio and Ivan. In the very early hours of the morning, they raided Ivan's house. But you know how the Sinaloa Cartel has people infiltrated everywhere? Well, Ivan got word of the raid before it happened, and he was able to escape and gather up his army. Shortly after this, the military raided Ovidio's house too. Ovidio initially started shooting at the officers. The officers fired back, and Ovidio soon realized he was heavily outnumbered. So he came out with his hands up.
Pase, por favor, pase, por favor. Vamos los tres. Tranquilo. Aquí, señor. Afuera. Tranquilo. Listo. Ponle aquí tu mano, señor. ¿Traes armas?
Ovidio was ready to go to jail that day, but by now, Ivan knew he was next on the raid list, and his army was on their way to his house. Shockingly, it was Ovidio who seemed to try to stop the
Diles que paren todo.
Ya no quiero que haya más.
But stopping is not the Sinaloa way. When bribery fails, the only solution in their eyes is execution. And to free Ovidio, the Sinaloa Sicarios decided to kill police officers until the government ordered his release. The Sicarios released cartel prisoners, set fires to cars to block important roads, and invaded the local airport. Trade and travel were completely stopped in the Sinaloa region for hours. 7 officers and 1 civilian were shot and left to die on the streets. The surviving civilians were instructed to hide in their homes. The cartel were imposing a curfew on the town until Ovidio would be released. 8 security officers were also taken hostage. The state prosecutor's office was attacked and 1 million people were held under siege until the president decided to order Ovidio's release. This happened after just 4 hours. Ovidio was released and all authorities retreated. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador justified his actions as a way to prevent further loss of life.
La captura de un delincuente que las vidas de las personas.
This just meant the Sinaloa Cartel truly was in control. This incident became known as Black Thursday, and it remains an embarrassing piece of Mexican history. The cartel gunman who seized control of the Mexican city of Culiacan on Thursday made 2 things clear. The Sinaloa Cartel is stronger than ever, and bringing peace to Mexico is going to take more than bringing down 1 man. And when Ovidio was arrested a second time in 2023, it got even worse. In 2022, there was a $5 million reward for the capture of Ovidio and Ivan and a $15 million reward for the arrest of El Mayo, the other leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. Los Chapitos were supposed to be living in hiding, but they just couldn't resist flashing their wealth.
Chapo's apparent #1 son doesn't hide his narco-world affluence. As we've reported, he posts video of his expensive fleet of sports cars, private planes, and the trail of cash that has made him a top target of federal agents in Chicago.
Yeah, that's what you get when you wave your blood money at the camera over and over again. Los Chapitos couldn't really accept the fact that, as notorious criminals, they should lay low and stay modest. So between 2019 and 2023, the DEA and the Mexican government planned out a more organized final raid to arrest Ovidio. On January 5, 2023, 200 special forces conducted a joint operation and arrested Ovidio Guzman for a second time. He was 15 minutes away from his brother Edgar's grave. Finally, there was an announcement.
The Mexican president has defended the military operation that captured a drug cartel leader, Ovidio Guzman, the son of jailed drug trafficker El Chapo. Violence erupted in Culiacan, a stronghold of the cartel. At least 19 members of the Sinaloa Cartel and 10 members of the military were killed.
Ovidio Guzman was finally behind bars, but the Sinaloa Cartel retaliated even more aggressively. 29 people died in just a few minutes in an attempt to capture El Chapo's son. 10 of the victims were police officers or soldiers, all of them gunned down in the middle of the street. 19 of the victims were Sinaloa Sicarios, but the numbers may be much, much larger. The Sinaloa tend to remove their bodies quickly from the scene as a sort of damage control. The fewer bodies that are counted, the more powerful they look. Indeed, Sinaloa soldiers went after authorities with all their might, firing military weapons and setting fires to cars, planes, and official buildings.
These criminal organizations shot with weapons at aircraft from the Mexican Air Force and from commercial airlines and at the international Culiacan airport facilities. Nevertheless, they did not achieve their goal of rescuing the alleged offender because we neutralized him.
Culiacan and Los Moches were transformed into war zones. Then, it expanded into neighboring towns too. The U.S. State Department warned against traveling to Mexico. Yep, the entire country, with a special emphasis on the areas affected by the riot. Mexican locals are also advised to stay at home and not go out unless absolutely necessary. As Sinaloa soldiers rained hell with military guns, the government responded with Black Hawk helicopters, attacking a convoy of 25 cartel vehicles. The cartel then attacked the helicopters and brought 2 of them down. Honestly, if you saw this in a movie, you'd think it's too many special effects. The cartel even shot at civilian aircrafts and hit 1. However, by now, Ovidio was already on board a Black Hawk helicopter, on his way to Altiplano prison. At the moment, it looks like Ovidio is on his way to being extradited to the United States to face the same fate as his father. El Chapo is at the ADX Florence, the US's toughest prison. If Ovidio gets there too, there won't be a happy father and son reunion. The two won't even be able to see each other at all. Instead, they will live in solitary confinement, faced with the consequences of their actions every single day. Ovidio Guzman's arrest was a huge blow to Los Chapitos and the Sinaloa Cartel's image in Mexico. The 4 brothers acted as though they were above the law, invincible, and stronger than the Mexican army. Well, it turns out they aren't, and other cartels want a piece of the cake. Cartel de Sinaloa continues to be led by Ovidio's brother, Ivan Guzman and El Mayo, who controls the other faction. Both factions are at war with the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Although smaller, the CJ&G is considered Mexico's bloodiest cartel. They are the ones that shoot first, ask questions later, and leave mutilated bodies on the streets as messages to rival cartels. The Sinaloa cartel operates in 22 of the 31 Mexican states. They're still Mexico's most powerful cartel on paper, but with brutal rivals like the CJ&G, they're losing ground, and new areas in Mexico are becoming war zones as we speak. One of them is Chiapas, in the south. Chiapas borders Guatemala, so it has a huge strategic role in the drug trade. So the Sinaloa, CJ&G, and the Gulf Cartel all operate within the area. For years, the Sinaloa was the dominant cartel in Chiapas, but after Ovidio's arrest, the CJ&G seems to be forcing their way in, trying to kick the Sinaloa out of the region entirely. Because of this, regular daytime shootouts have become the norm, and the murder rates are on the rise in the area. El Mayo's men still hold strong in Chiapas, and reportedly they have paid the local police hundreds of thousands of dollars for protection. So instead of protecting the frightened civilians, the police protects the Sinaloa cartel. This led to something else. Local communities rallied up to form vigilante or auto defense groups, such as the group El Machete. They describe themselves as David seeking to defeat Goliath. In other words, angry townspeople who have had enough death, destruction, and corruption. They're going after sicarios themselves if the police won't do it. There are also Guatemalan gangs operating in Chiapas, also after the Sinaloa cartel. And reportedly, the CJ&G is funding their local street gangs in order to eradicate the Sinaloa. This brings us to the gruesome video in question. On February 10, 2023, a stomach-turning video turned up on the dark web. Reportedly, it was filmed in Chiapas, just months before a Sinaloa cartel member was executed on camera in the same region. The second video just goes to show the sheer level of brutality that is destroying Chiapas at the moment. The video has 2 parts, a 50-second interrogation and a 30-second mass killing. The first video shows 5 shirtless men kneeling down, with their hands tied behind their backs in a wooded area. The sicario asks, "Who within the government authorities were supporting you guys?" To which the captive responds, "We were being supported by the Ministry of Real Policemen, specifically Commander Daniel Guzman Mayer, and the individual from the state and sector police, Sabino Camacho Garcia. The leader of the organization is Wilma Santizo, along with Deputy Jorge Balatoro Osorio, aka El Palon." When the sicario asks what they were doing in the area, the men says they were abducting people from the business, as well as kidnapping individuals from drug spots where marijuana and coke was being sold, so that they would fall into formation with us. Whoever wouldn't align would be disappeared. It was by this manner that the citizens of Motocintla would pay us extortion. Those were the man's last words. The other 4 didn't even get to speak. At this point, the interrogation stops and the video skips to the second part. Guys, if you don't want the gory part, just skip ahead a minute or so. This video is just as bloody and brutal as the infamous Rosetas and CJ&G videos. The 5 men are brutally murdered at the same time. As this is happening, the captor states, "This goes out to all the son of a bitch gunmen from Sinaloa who tried to come here to kill. The town of Motazintla already has a plaza. It has its owner, you sons of bitch. Get the f out of here, you fuck. Motazintla has its owner already, you sons of bitch. The next sons of bitch who try to come through here will meet the same fate, far worse than this." The men have now been blindfolded, and they have 5 machete-wielding sicarios standing behind them. The men are and as blood leaks down their bodies. The sounds are straight out of hell. They grunt, scream, and wheeze as their vocal cords are. The sicario seen in the earlier interrogation also participates in the. Once his victim hits the ground, he starts hacking away at his neck so aggressively that he hits his chest too. He completely his victim. When he's done cutting his head off, he lifts the head and shows it to the camera for a good few seconds. The sight is truly chilling. The video ends as the other victims are still being decapitated, each sicario taking pleasure in reducing these poor men to meat. It's also truly haunting to realize this is such a recent event. Horror incidents like this still happen today to real people all over the world. Sadly, this is one of the consequences of cartels and their never-ending bloody wars. Now, it's unclear who posted this video. As of 2023, the Sinaloa Cartel has lots of enemies. On one hand, there's the notorious CJ&G, and they have been known to post some of the worst murder videos online. In fact, Los Zetas normalized this horrific act, and the CJ&G took it to the next level. But some online commentators argued this video can't have been posted by the CJ&G, as they always proudly say their name when issuing a warning. This sicario didn't say the cartel's name. Whether it was the CJ&G, the Gulf Cartel, or a smaller, local cartel in Chiapas, we might never know. What is certain is that the Sinaloa Cartel has a lot of work to do if they want to stay Mexico's top drug trade dogs. Before we finish this video, I must warn you guys, don't go looking for this gruesome video or any others like this online. Nothing good ever comes out of watching extreme, real-life violence. This is the tragic reality of the war on drugs. The more cartels feel threatened, the more violent they become. And when a cartel seems to crumble, other cartels become more aggressive, trying to win their territory. In Mexico, it seems like the government doesn't stand much of a chance against cartels. The CJ&G is bringing down military helicopters with grenades, and Sinaloa lays siege to entire towns to protest the arrest of one drug lord. If violence doesn't stop violence, what will? Hey, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on the war on drugs and the cartel wars of Mexico? Is there an end to the chaos? Let us know in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.